He's been involved with race management, organising, been a main organiser on the Taysar World Championships, racing over 100 dinghies in that. He's done keelboat coaching. The actual Worlds is a particular one of note, but there's many. And also another avenue is he's a highly accomplished photographer. So I'm sure he won't mind if anybody wants to ask questions about photography tonight. I'm sure Ron will be very pleased and capable to answer. Ron is the Vice President of the Photography Club down at Geograph Bay as another of his attributes. So without any further ado, I'll say that Ron is here to tell us about his latest adventures, which he has many, and I'm sure he's going to take us back to his Viking ancestry in his talk on Norwegians, Scots, Lochs and a little bit of sailing, would you believe? Ron Jensen.
I feel a bit tired after that. Thank you very much, Rob, for coming. This opportunity came up from about 2 years ago with a chap called Harold Waller. I met him in the Caribbean. We formed a good friendship and we've visited each other many times. A great guy. Fortunately, he also owns a very large air conditioning company, mainly heating rather than cooling, and in Norway, and he could afford the yacht we were travelling on. The invitation came about 2 years ago, and there's just no way that I was going to say no to this one. So anyway, you will see what we've got to offer. I hope you enjoy it. We started off, this is fairly recent, June this year. So the trip was from Tonsberg, just south of, excuse me, you can still hear? Yep. Tonsberg, just south of, in the red, just south of Oslo, and came down the coast. Got hell beaten out of us with the current here runs this way, and we had west-northwest winds at about 30 knots. Forecast was 20s. Hell beaten out of us. Came back to Farsund on the southern coast. Waited a couple of days. Then got a weather window and headed out to Scotland. Around Scotland, and I've got some other maps later on. We'll go into that. Around Scotland up to the Orkneys, out of Hebrides, Orkneys, Fair Isle, back here to Skudeneshavn, and around bottom of Norway, across to Sweden just to finish off, and back home. 5 weeks in all, just over 5 weeks. The yacht, Sweden Yacht 42, really, really well maintained. Nothing went wrong. It was one of those just extremely well maintained. The owner sends it to the Naiad factory in Sweden every 3 years, and it gets a complete overhaul. They go right through it. So just an absolute pleasure to sail on. It was comfortable. It was extremely comfortable on board. Normal timber work throughout their yachts. The owner, Harold Volley, and I don't know who he is. And the other man on board, so the three of us, Guy Matheson, a Exxon oil executive, retired 3 days before the start of the voyage. Awesome people skills, and was the biggest dag on board, just carried on. He was the silly man. So it was light, it was kept humorous, great fun. The yacht itself, about a 9/10 rig, pretty standard rig. about 43 feet. All moderate stuff for those who are into sailing, into the design area. Moderate stuff. 2.1 metre draft is moderate. The displacement at 10 tonnes and almost just short, 40% is the ballast ratio. So still quite a stiff boat. Its performance was very, very good. I was surprised just how well it did go. So Sweden yacht up there with probably just short of Swan Norta, Baltic. Those the absolute top boats. Cabin wise, owner's cabin forward, second toilet shower head arrangement, another one down aft, and 2 cabins down aft. Because it's set up for cruising, a heap of tankage underneath the after bunks, so you lost a lot of storage area there. The best thing about this vessel was the forward that we used was the forward shower, right up in the V. Used that space extremely well. Hatch directly above it was ideal for our arrangements on board. Excuse me while I go through the technical side. It just gives you a mental picture maybe of the vessel itself and what it's capable of. Sail drive, 3 kVA generator, which we almost didn't use because we motored so much. Fuel capacity around 285 litres, and as you can see by the water capacity, quite significant for this type of yacht, for yacht. If you get into the Beneteau or Bavaria, I think about 52% of the Bavarias are sold in Norway. The capacities here are less than they go for the storage on board, but they're not doing the miles. So this is set up to do the miles. Transatlantic, no problems. So after we got hell beaten out of us, we came back to Farsund, and this is, you wouldn't believe it's blowing 30 knots outside, but 10 miles away, but this is what I woke up to in the morning. Sun shining on spectacular hillside. And a bike ride. I've forgotten how hilly Norway is, and it nearly killed me. The other two seem to survive quite well, but I am 10 years older than them. Let's go back one. Guys seem to know someone. This is Lost Haven, just near Farsund. Seem to know someone everywhere, so we managed to score a beer each on our bike ride and headed back after that. But that's not a bad view, is it? How do you view off your back balcony? I was quite impressed. So, wind-wise, this is what we came out into. Almost permanently off the bottom of Norway is this, what we call the yellow patch. This is orange at the moment. When I took this off the computer, but this tended to be yellow around the 15 knots is yellow, so up around 20, 25s here. And we'd work, we were in here. What we wanted to try and do was get out the back of this. We didn't quite make it, and we just said, this is too hard, we're not having fun. That's why we went back. We waited a couple of days, window came, this lot moved across a little bit, and we went out in about 15 knots and ended up back in this, which seems to be a permanent arrangement, or a semi-permanent arrangement, and made our way across to Inverness over here. So 385 miles, about 56 hours of mainly motoring. Probably we motored 80% of the time. Motor sailed probably 60% of that, and sailed for about 20%. What did we use for weather forecasting? I used Predict Wind. Harold would use Wind Finder, and we'd also go to YRNO, which is the Norwegian weather site, and they have a worldwide prediction program. Between them, we'd come up with something that we thought would give us the best weather picture that we could and we could have a crack at. So crossing the North Sea, we had the whitebeak dolphins, very large. And the oil gas platforms are everywhere. Between England and Norway, they've got that pretty well sewn up. I think that was Denmark's greatest loss, was it, when they sold the North Sea or gave it to Norway? AIS. Hadn't really been involved with ship identification systems, but AIS, all of these are vessels. The long point is the vessel direction. This is us going through here. These tend to be oil platforms, and we'd get a call up if our course. They had AIS as well, the platforms do, and they could tell where we were going, who we were. They could call us by name, so they'd be calling Starry Night and saying, "We don't like your course, change course to such and such to keep well clear of the platforms." You'll notice that our angle here is like that. That's because there is significant tide and current. For those who have been in the North Sea, significant tide and current moving you around. Not pretty. So we ended up in Inverness here. So our trip around, I'll just cover this quickly. Our trip around Scotland, through Inverness, Loch Ness, into Fort Augustus, which is the bottom end of Loch Ness, up into Loch Oik, through another couple of lochs, into Lochs. I think they were doing it tough for names there. Coming out at Fort William, or actually it's the name of the little village is Corpac. Then you go into Loch Linney, and down Loch Linney, actually in the Atlantic Ocean now, down Loch Linney, and we headed up to Tobermory on the Isle of Mull. Out of there, up to Isle of Skye, into where Talisker whiskies are. You can go up the inside here, but you've got about 7 to 8 knot tidal effects. Out of there, long sail up to Stornoway, at the top end of the Hebrides, across to a little place called Kinlochbervie, and then out here to the Orkneys. So we'll cover that area, and by the way, feel free to stick your hand up and ask a question. If you feel you need to, or if I get it wrong, pronunciation's incorrect. Coming into Inverness, the entry, the actual entry is at Clactonharry, but Inverness Bridge is 29 metres, so that's probably the major restrictor for yachts going through. There's a 3 metre tide. We happened to pick a full moon, 3 metre tide. We had wide open throttle going for it, and we were doing about 3 knots, I think, to try and get underneath, and going like this as the current affected us. Clactonharry is the border control, so the Norwegians had no problems. I did. Well, I didn't have problems. They wanted to see everything from me, and gave me a letter to let me into the country. There's no entry plus or minus 2 hours either side of low tide, mainly because there is no water there at the entrance to the Caledonian Canal. Quite long, 60 miles, 38 miles of locks, 22 miles of canals that were dug by hand in the late 1800s, if I recall. 32 metres above sea level, so Loch Oik is quite high. There are 29 locks all attended, and it is a seasonal thing. It is a time, and Channel 74 used throughout the whole lock system. So when you're calling up the locks, or a lot of swing bridges, There's a lot of traffic moving north and south across this canal system. So a lot of the bridges swing through 90 degrees. They are also attended. We were given at Clacton-Harry, we were given a key, and that would get us into all the toilets, showers, ablution systems throughout the whole system, throughout the Caledonia Canal system. So very easy. They've made it easy, set it up really well. 45 metres is the maximum size vessel. I've seen some big ones go through there, mostly not power boats, but large power boats. The limits are 10 metres beam, 4 metres draft, and mast height of 27.4 metres. I'm not sure where they get the 27.4 metres. Maybe that's extreme tides with that Inverness Bridge area, or some power lines going through. Although most of the power lines seem to be around 35 metres. Speed limits, and it cost us £285 for up to 8 days. We used 6 days, 7 days. 7th day we headed out of the canal system. So we made the most of it. And but you have got 8 days. So Clacton-Harry, just after we went in, the tide was going out, and you can see just how our vessel is tied in alongside while we did our entry stuff. But the tide was rapidly falling. And about a mile upstream, after 2 Lochs, is Muirtown in Inverness, and I bet it's about 11 o'clock at night after we'd been to the pub. We've got a really nice pub at Clacton-Harry, and made most welcome. We were spending money. It was good. We did a lot of pub meals, as you can imagine. If you ever go there, you don't have to have your own yacht and come from another country or whatever. You can go to Cayley Cruises. Cayley has just above Inverness. Inverness is just around the corner here, after a set of Lochs, has its own cruises, and those cruises are something like this. Pretty beefy. Got a bow thruster, heavy duty rubber on the sides, plenty of a few fenders, but the rubber on the sides gives them they're solid, and they're built so you can spend time in the rain there. You'll see that most of the time we've got this, and it was quite significant that we had so much sun. In fact, we were checking our charts to see whether we're actually in Scotland. So coming into a typical Lochs, some jetties to moor alongside of, and while you're waiting your turn, and boats to come down or go up, they try to work it so they minimise the amount of water they use. And a typical swing bridge this time had swung through about 80. So it's power boats, everyone going through, but we did have, as we came into Fort Augustus at the bottom end of Loch Ness, one of these bridges, they couldn't open it. So the heat was so high, it was 30 degrees, so extreme heat. The bridge steel had expanded and locked itself in the roadway, and it wasn't going anywhere. So there was about 30 boats, top and bottom, waiting to get through the next day. Loch Ness, I had Nessie Cam going, but nothing there. Just stunning. It really is lovely in this weather. I have been here before. I was on Harold's. He had a Do 440, and in this he was up top motoring, and I was down below in the. All the yachts up there have these wonderful oil heaters, Some of you, I'm sure, have got them on your boats, but they are superb. The amount of heat is wonderful, and for the amount of oil they use, diesel they use, it's very, very efficient. So the previous time we were using the heater and him upstairs in full wet weather gear. This is this is Fort Augustus. It is a tourist town because there are about 5-6 lochs in the middle of town. All the pubs are down this side here. If you can see that, all the pubs are down there, and so it's easy to sit outside in these areas here and watch the passing traffic. So it's people watching. This is us down here, waiting our turn to come up. So we've just come through. The doors have closed on the lock here, and we're coming in. And this would be typical of a private boats going through. They tend to keep the Cayley cruisers and the private boats separate. Some of the skippers on the Cayley cruisers are not very good. One of the problems, you do need probably 3 people on board. I would recommend 3. You can get away with 2, this is the turbulence that comes through as the water flows through from the upper lock into the lock you're in. So if you're right up the front, you get it all, and it does throw the boat around a lot. Harold kept the engine going, and he had a big bow thruster, so he was using the bow thruster to stop the boat from swinging into boat on the other side or slamming into the lock walls. The previous time we were there, we actually sheared the anchor roller system off the bow of the boat. Just sheared the 3/8 bolts off, 10mm bolts. Okay, so what we had was we had 9 fenders on board. 2 big ball fenders for front and back, so that when the boat swung, they would hit the wall first. He's got a special step for when you come in to a berth, bow in, so you can actually step on board. Didn't want to remove that, so large ball fender, small one, another one down aft, small one here, plus we bought some 1.5 metre by about this round fenders to go at either end, and then the smaller ones went in between. So that's what we used to keep ourselves off the wall from the lessons we learnt the previous time we've gone through. 2 lines, one from the bow, that's mine, and Guy had the other one down aft. And we would try and control the boat from there. Then we'd move to the pub and have a beer. The exit is at Corpac. This is about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were the first boats to get out. As you're moving up and down through the Lochs, this is what you throw your rope around, a couple of turns around it, and control it from there. So you're not taking all the weight, but you are controlling the vessel. It tries to jump away from you. We then sailed up to Tobermory at the top of, let's get rid of my dot. Tobermory at the top of the Isle of Mull, tourist town again. And I did a stitch of about five photographs here, 5 photos to create this. But it was the only way I could see of giving that feel of what the place was like. Again, still stunning weather, just unbelievable. A lot of tourists coming in. We were just at the start of the tourist season, so this is about very early July, all the boats were on the move. And of course, Tobermory whiskey, which I didn't particularly like because it's quite smoky, it is quite peaty. Some people do, I don't. But what they did in the tasting was give you an eye dropper with some water in it. Drop 4 drops of water into your whiskey. Unbelievable change. It was palatable all of a sudden. So if you don't like the whiskey, you find it just a little bit on the nose, try a little bit of water in it, drop a block of ice in it, and you might find it changes totally. But that was my lesson on whiskey. About 9 o'clock at night, coming back from dinner, we met some Gaelic singers in one of the pubs here. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, singing in Gaelic. Couldn't understand a word they're saying. And then there were other vessels sailing past us when we were out, which were just stunning. You can't pass up opportunities. You cannot photograph well a yacht. The mast is too high, so you either cut the top off, or if you get the whole lot in, it's too far away and you can't see it. So if you can tell me a way of doing it, yes, you could do it in portrait rather than landscape shot, but difficult to take, isn't it? Yes, it is. And then a lot of beautiful 1930s to 70s, 80s yachts around. Topsail schooner, something like that. Is that what it is? Someone? No one? Topsail ketch. A few of these around. This guy up here been pinching fenders. I just counted all the ones across there, then you can see all those down here, and the ones across the back of the boat. I think it was trying. But for the normal weather they have there, it's probably the appropriate boat. Most of the British boats tended to be older, of a more traditional style. As we got into back across the border into Norway, Norway is quite rich, and their boats are very different. So Harold was, this probably sums him up. He was born to sail. Just last couple of years, they won the IRC or whatever the current rating system is. It is. In Norway, in a 36-foot Dailer. They're all about his age and early 60s. So he's no slouch, but he still does work. Then on Skye, we went up this long fjord, and where Talisker whiskey is. Talisker homestead is actually on the other side of the island, other side of this peninsula. We didn't go there for Talisker whiskey. The World Cup soccer was on, so we went to the pub and watched the soccer. Another pint and a meal, a lot of our meals. The next day, this was Skye. Not the most inviting place I've ever come across, and the coastline that would kept you well away. Again, you see the water is, we were motoring most of this time. Then up to Stornoway out of Hebrides. Spent about 3 days here. Some great pubs, great meals, more colour coming into some of the homes, some of the housing. And most of the yachts here tend to be the more serious cruising type yachts. They were blue water yachts, blue water cruisers. So there's a couple in particular that I liked, but we hired. Someone pulled the plug, let the water out. again in Stornoway. We hired a car, went down to the Callanish Stones, about 5,000 years old, if I recall correctly. I was, with my photography, I was trying to get a lead in how do you lead the eye into the central mound. I was using the stone in there, so I'm not sure how successful it was. But then I had these two guys being their normal silly self, and that was it. It's that sort of silliness that kept it light and easy on board that made it such an enjoyable trip. The mad buggers. But also gave an idea of the height of the stones that have been erected. About a 12th century church right on the bottom. St Clement's. Lewes Castle in Stornoway. And I have the Celtic or Celtic, you tell me which one, festival, and that was due in about 2 weeks' time. So this whole place was getting a full clean out and sort out in readiness for that. It had some great gargoyles, including this one, which is probably how my tongue felt some mornings after a hard night out. This is one of the two French boats I was interested in, about 40 foot. Interestingly, it doesn't have a wheel steering. It has tiller steering. Both of them really, really well set up, thought out. The second one is this one, Django, or whatever it is, 1170. I like the Dodger. You can get you down inside. Again, really well thought out. The guy who was on this had sailed from Iceland to the Faroes, had a 10-hour sleep. It's 400 miles to the Faroes from Iceland, another 400 miles from the Faroes to out of Hebrides. He had 10 hours sleep in the Faroes, and then continued on and arrived and had about a 2 or 3 days sleep before he moved on, but single-handed. So it was capable of those sorts of runs. Again, what's 11.7? Around that 40 foot, no, 36, 37 foot mark. But fast cruising, solid boats, well designed, well constructed. And another one, this one is part of the OVNI range from Alabat in France. And this aluminium multi-chine can sit on the bottom, lift keel, but is still an offshore boat. And again, we were parked alongside this. Couldn't help but be impressed by the quality of the fit out, how it was set up. Very, very. Some people put a lot of thought into it. Some people have a lot of money and just throw it at it. Halberg Rassies, this time in Loch Ness. We radioed him and said, pull your fenders in and we'll take a good photo and give it to you at the other end. So that's what we did. He was a very happy man in his help in his boat. And then there's some boats that just don't move. The green world. Okay. From Stornoway across to, we tried to get up around the corner here. This is Cape Wrath. Tried to get up around that corner, but the winds had too much north in it, and we ended up going into Kinloch Burby because there was there was the semi-finals of the World Soccer, Croatia versus England. Next day we went across to Stromness, and from there, out of there, to Pirrawall, Fair Isle, and then back to Norway, across the North Sea. The Scarpa flow I think I might have missed something here. Just a sec. Yes. Just indulge me for a little while. Kinloch Burvey. When we were in coming out of the Caledonian Canal, we went to the Lochs Hotel and watched Argentina play England, and all the Scots were going, Argentina, Argentina, and I'm going, what? And then a little bit further, similar sort of thing happening. Got up into Stornoway, and a guy got in my ear about the English, and I went, wow. Got to Kinloch Burvey. Kinloch Burvey is a great harbour for, it'd be the place to go if there was a huge raging storm outside. The pub, someone recommended, another person on the dock recommended we eat on board. It was a wise decision. I spent 20 years in the Navy, and I can tell you that I've been to some low dive pubs, and this one matched all of them. We got up there, there's about 30 Scots drinking. The show's on between Croatia and England. There's three Brits sitting down the back, 2 Norwegians and myself sitting a little bit further forward. And the Croatians get a goal. Yes, there's a big cheers, and they turn around to the Brits at the back. England's going home, England's going home. They're giving them heaps. England get a goal, and just before the end, Croatia gets a goal again. And they sing, England's going home. They're cheering and shouting. I was going, this is really different. Looking at the Norwegians, they're going, wow. Yeah, if it had been us in New Zealand, we'd be supporting New Zealanders. Anyway, the English smart people got up and moved out early, and they waved them goodbye and gave them heaps. 2 Norwegians and I got up, and we walked out, and they said to me, bye. They'd heard me speaking, and bye, tough luck. And I went, mate, I'm Australian. And he said, you're Australian? Raced up to me, grabbed me, hugged me, and said, you hate the bastards too. So we moved into the Orkneys. The Orkneys has Scarpa Flow. Scarpa Flow is very unique. Home for the British Home Fleet, Navy based there for both wars. They lost the Royal Oak there to a German submarine sneaking through, and took it out. After the First World War, there were 53 ships of the German High Fleet came in, and they ended up scuffling themselves rather than hand over the ships to the British. So there's a heap of ships there. 53, I think 53 went to the bottom. The tidal flows in and out of here are significant. So out of the bottom down here and through this Hoy Sound. This is Hoy. Hoy Sound is there. And Stromness means, Ollie, what does Stromness mean? Storm point? Something like that in Norwegian? Yeah. Tidal point. Yeah. So you can't. I tried to photograph how tough this was going through there and failed miserably. There are still lots of bunkers and all sorts of systems there covering this area. But the town of Stromness is a really nice village. Great village atmosphere. The ferry that comes across from Scotland, which isn't that far away, you can see it. Private ship in there, had 17 people on, including 2 Australians. So we went around the back of this, and there's the mast. You can just see a couple of masts there. That's where we were, where we ended up. But we were recommended to go in there. Wonderful people, friendly. Tracy, the harbour master there, she was a nurse, and she said, I don't know anything about boats, so I don't know how I got the job of harbour master, but I'm here. But she said, do you like eggs? Yes, we do. And put a dozen eggs on our deck for the next day. We hired a car again, and some of the old buildings, stone buildings. This is about three shots here to get this. Beautiful, beautiful stone buildings. Scarpa. Now we're getting into better whiskies. I like this is starting to get into my style. Less peat, less smoke. But the favourite of all, Highland Park, suits me. And Harold and Guy didn't mind it either. At the top end of the main island in the Orkneys is this Ein Hollow sound, and this is the tide going out. This is typical, the skerries, as they call them, the tidal rush and the standing waves. You really have to time your leaving port around the tides. Absolutely critical. We got up to Pirrawall and met a guy on the dock there, and he said, "Do you eat lobster?" Norwegians went, "Oh, yes." So he said, "I've got to go out and pick them up." So I joined him. I went out, pulled his pots for him, and we came back in. He said, "What size pot you got to cook them in?" I said, "About this big." And he said, "Not good enough. I'll cook them, bring them back." The harbour master again. He brought them back, and we had those for dinner. It was that sort of friendliness and that sort of thing that made it so good. What is it? We were light-hearted. We were a bit silly. We were friendly as we could. If people come up and said, "Do you," or start talking to me in Norwegian or some other language, I'd turn to them and say, "Do you speak Australian?" And asking in English, of course. "Do you speak Australian?" And they go, you could almost see them, their heads turning over as they tried to work out what do Australians speak. Turn around, look at me, and I'd have a smirk on my face. It told them two things. One, I was an Australian, not from any other country in the world that they might have been guessing at. And the second one was that I was happy to have a bit of a laugh and a joke about it all. So it was that light-hearted approach that made it so different and made us so welcome, that I know of. They didn't say any different, so. The photography, I've got my two cameras. As I've said to someone, I have a love-hate relationship with my cameras. They weigh so much, but you get the results. So alongside the vessel, look mum, I can jump, and look mum, I can run. So you can see the difference between having long wings and short wings. So this puffin going for its life, trying to get airborne. Fulmar, in rain, actually caught the raindrops here just as they're bouncing. So the camera equipment is absolutely worth it. Then into Fair Isle, puffin photography. They have holes in the ground that they go into. But this is some of the serious people. There's a full bird observatory there. It's under the Scottish Heritage listing or something. The port is very, very small, and you end up rafting up. We're outside a Dutch 50-ton steel boat there. He wanted to go outside of us. We said no, thank you. All this steel netting to stop the rocks falling down into the harbour. It's not very friendly. The coastline isn't. Nor does the weather help. So we're quite often walking in fog, and then we're trying to work out how we take photographs and all the rest of it. But back at the little rookery where the puffins were, they would come up to you. I had one come up to my foot and looked up at me, stuck its head on its side, look at me, hello, Mr. Man, how are you? Very nice. But in all the photography, trying to communicate, get what is the story behind the photograph? Some nice communication there between the two. their fishing skills coming back from fishing to feed their young. Some of them are real gutses. How do they do that? I had to read it up, and I did that yesterday because I thought someone might ask me at the end. But I'll tell you, they have hooks underneath the top of their top beak, facing backwards, and they use their tongue to squeeze the fish that they've just caught up onto the hooks and embed them on the hooks. I think they hold the fish up there with their tongue while they catch the next one in between their tongue and the bottom beak, then feed that up and keep feeding them up. And you end up with this. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Real character. Like trying to photograph birds in flight. So hard, so hard. I took about 700 photographs in about 3 hours, and trying to get it against a dark background so it popped out. They're so fast, they travel so fast. They kamikaze hit the ground when they come in. Up really close. You can still see the drops of water from there coming out of the water. This is the one I inserted. This is isn't that nice and cuddly and furry? This is one for the girls. Feathery. I like the wing details on the fulmar. Again, lots of bird photography, and I didn't need that big lens. I found I was doing better by backing it off. What's the story? How close was that?
He said apologising to his wife.
Absolutely. That's what I think. And no, it didn't work. I like that. It has an enormous appeal. So we then sailed back to Norway. So into Skudeneshavn, just north of Stavanger, Egersund, down the coast, past Farsund, Mundal, Kristiansand, and then we had a crew change there. Guy jumped off, and Harold's wife, Carrie, came on board, and we then went to a little anchorage near Lillesand, Grimstad, and then up to Risør, where there was the M32 World Match Racing Championships were on, and a whole heap of Australians were there. Across to a day sail across to Sweden, just south of Kosta, and then on the last day we came up and back up to home at Tonsberg. Did I pronounce those reasonably well, Ollie?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay. I'm glad about that. It wasn't always sunny. So fairly typical, full wet weather gear, automatic inflation device, and our harnesses, plus in our pockets we had all of us had a personal EPIRB. This is crossing the North Sea. The Scottish trawlers, you'd see them, but you had to see them first because they weren't using AIS and they weren't showing up, which is a bit painful, but they don't want people to know where they are, I assume. Just hard to hit them. Early morning sunrise on the way across. So that was 280 miles from Fair Isle, about 280. Fair Isle to Stavanger area, 36 hours. Skudeneshavn, just one of those magic little villages. Quite touristy now. All the fishing buildings have been changed. This is where they used to bring the fish in. They have the bar coming up with the crane off it and all the rest of it. But you can pull up alongside, anywhere alongside. A lot of tourists come across in their boats on the weekends from Stavanger, and and visit there. Then further south, heading into Egersund, there's a long fjord entering there, and all these little the weekend cottages, fishing shacks. And some of you will have been in this predicament where you are sure all the paperwork says yes, we will clear. We had about 1.5 metre clearance, but you always tend to stand to one side of the mast. Coming into Egersund, a bit of a party town. I bailed about 1 o'clock in the morning and said, and I left it to the 2 Norwegians. They kept going. I had enough trouble. The Norwegians were very, very good. When we had people rafted up alongside, and we'd have a group of maybe 10 people on board in the cockpit, all having a wine or a beer or a whiskey. If I was involved in the conversation, they would all speak English. If they had a little conversation between 2 of them, they'd flick back into Norwegian. As soon as they'd finished, they'd come back into English for me, just as a courtesy to me. And I thought that was absolutely wonderful. Some of the power boats that I saw, I liked this one. It was an Italian one. Had a round stern on it, and I thought, wow. From a planing hull design point of view, quite difficult. And there it was alongside us in Mundal. And you just notice that it has the underwater hull is actually, and what's above the water and what's below the water is different. So there's actually a standard hull underneath the water, and they've got this nice. There's only 2 of them in Norway. The guy told me, and he said that was. It was nice. It went well. It cut through the waves well. There was a family of 4 on board. Typical Norwegian sailing routine, where the whole cockpit is covered in, and with your drip diesel drip heater on board, you would end up with all of this being warm as well. And it rains a lot. It does rain a lot. They go out in the rain. If you didn't go out because it was raining, you'd never go out. So they go walking, they go sailing in the rain. It doesn't matter. You just dress appropriately. As I say, it's not cold, you're just inappropriately dressed. So I can understand why they go this way. You can start to understand why many of the vessels that come out of Europe have a lot of timber work in them. I have none in my boat, absolutely none. I refuse to have it. It's maintenance. But they have it because they spend so much time down below staying warm in the wood adds a lot of atmosphere, and I get that now. I get it. It does make a huge, huge difference. Some of the things you learn. With the price of fuel in Norway, I have absolutely no idea how they keep these boats running. I never saw so many 40 to 60 foot Princess, Maritimo power boats in my whole life. The E18 is the road between Oslo and Kristiansand. This is the marine side of it. And so we continue on. They were everywhere, right at the height of the season, of course. Everyone's out on the water. Lingor, the rich and famous 2 little islands with a little passageway between them. Stunning, but there's no way I can afford to live there. You need to get used to rafting. They'll tie up next to rocks. A lot of these rocks have a painted sign on the rocks indicating that you can tie up there. They have steel stakes already in the rocks, and other vessels will come alongside and tie up with you. There are some rules about rafting up, and while we almost never raft up in Australia, everywhere we went, we probably had at least one or two boats alongside. So if the people on board ask, just as a courtesy, if you don't mind a yacht being on the outside, put 2 fenders over. If you leave the boat, just put 2 fenders over. It tells the people that that you are welcome alongside. Always cross the deck in front of the mast, never behind the mast. Don't jump on yachts, just step down gently. And the final thing is you get to meet some great people. We met some wonderful people who just happen to be alongside. From southern Norway right up to the back up to Oslo, you can travel inside the islands, and it's quite narrow at times. There are bottlenecks when there's too many boats around, but it's like this, really comfortable. Coming into Kristiansand, this is on the island just outside Kristiansand, from the Second World War, still remnants there. We then went up to, after we'd done a couple of small anchorages, went up to Risør for the M32s, and they had them here at Freshie, wasn't it? Yes, a couple of years ago, a year or two ago. And who should be there but Torva Mersky, Cam Sigrid, Ian Williams' Pindar team, Sam Gilmore and Adam Negri were with Måns Holberg from Sweden? Yes, Sweden. And Drew Malcolm was on the media there with his with camera and drone. One of my, as we come in towards the end, one of my things I wanted was birds in flight, the puffins, and I wanted Highland cattle, but I had to go to Sweden to get them. Didn't see any in Scotland, so. But I think I got a good shot of a Highland cow. Look at those eyelashes. You'd kill for those, wouldn't you? Not flies, but the eyelashes. And then this one little happy chappy made his way home with Caree sitting in the background. Back across, this is just about crossing the Norwegian border from Sweden, back to Tonsberg. Thank you very much. If there's any questions.
About the marine environment. Did you see a lot of wildlife, or did you find a lot of trash?
No trash.
Really?
No, almost no trash at all.